Julia, how does one become dubbed the Meryl Streep of audiobooks or the Adele of audiobooks? Because that is who you are.
Well, okay, the Adele one was from the New Yorker. The Meryl Streep one, I think, is actually probably Taylor Jenkins Reid. You know, I think that just goes to show that audiobooks are not a large enough part of the zeitgeist quite yet that we have our own icon within it. So we're pulling credibility from other media. That's what I think.
No, but that is you. Like, I'm in a lot of book clubs, I'm in a lot of online communities, and it's always like, oh, I love her. I love her. I'll listen to a book. If she's like, who cares about what the book's about? Like, if she's the narrator, I'm going to listen to it. So, how did you go from, because you started acting like in front of the camera,
Yes,
how
yeah.
did you go from that to narrating? What are we at? Over 500 audiobooks now?
Like
600?
700, I think. Yeah.
700?
Yeah. It's a very good question, and I can barely remember. Here's what happened. I was, yes, a child actor. I grew up doing on camera. And then I went to school, and when I left the business and went to college, I was doing English and creative writing. That's what my degree is in. And one of my best friends from college, her mother happened to work in audiobooks, and she came up to me at my college graduation and said, you have with your particular skill set, I think you could be very good at this. And I had never listened to audiobooks. I didn't even know what they were. And at that time in the industry, so I graduated in 2008, and a couple of things was happening. One is that Hollywood had changed enormously. We were just coming out of like the writers' strike that was going on at the time. Cable was just beginning to boom, and a lot of movie stars were getting into TV and taking my old job. And so the work had very much dried up in on camera. And I loved audiobooks. Like it turns out when I started doing them, I just said, this is perfect for me. Like this is that she was right. This is everything that I love in one job. And but at the time you had to know someone who knew someone to do it. And people didn't really like doing it because it wasn't very well paid and it's a lot of work and it doesn't really, if you're an actor, you like acting with other people and it doesn't give you that. Um, and so it was just this kind of like small coterie of people who were really passionate about it and really loved doing it. And and it just snowballed. I started out doing one book every quarter and then a book a month. And then suddenly I looked up and I was doing 70 books a year. And it was just a volume kind of industry. And then Audible blew up and the the industry just has it's been an interesting thing to witness this explosion.
Does it work the way acting works, where you have an agent that submits you for a job? I'm assuming now at your level, you're not auditioning, like listen to the 700 books and you can hear a
You'd be
wide
surprised.
array.
You'd be surprised. I still get asked occasionally to audition, and I'm like, "What haven't you heard me do?" Like, I don't have the time to do that, unfortunately, anymore. Um, it doesn't. Now I think there was one agent in the industry who even would touch audiobooks, but again, because there was so little money in it, very few agents took it seriously. Even in voiceover, it was just like, there's not, what am I going to make $100 on this book? It's not worth it. And so it was really, which I think is actually part of the success of the industry, is the fact that it was so one to one. It was audiobook producers getting to know narrators, getting to know their talent, getting to know their personal details so that they could match them, maybe their lived experience with the right project. And it was just a very it was a small town. It was a very small town. And as long as you were reliable and got things done when you said you were going to get them done, and it's a real like if you're a type A, you know, front of the class kind of kid, you got rewarded pretty quickly in audiobooks.
Which sounds wild because like I'm one of those people, and it's like it's crazy that you have to say that, like, listen, you'll be successful if you just do what you're supposed to do.
The biggest the thing that spun me around the most in this industry was having come from on camera where I was working so hard to be good and to be a trained actor and to have range, and only to realize that no one really wants that from you. Like they just want you for like a very specific type. They have a certain image of you in their head. And it was a real shock to me that there was a correlation between how hard I worked and how responsible I would be and how kind I was to people, and then the success I would have. Where in Hollywood, there's no correlation. It doesn't matter. And so yeah, I agree. It was very refreshing actually.
No, I believe that. I was a TV reporter and anchor for a few years, and that is a very cutthroat, heartless industry where it's like,
Yes.
yeah, similar, similar. Okay, so then you talked about like collaboration, like in front of the camera versus audiobook. What is the collaboration like, not just with maybe other narrators of a book or the author of a book? Like, do they say, here's the manuscript, go be brilliant, or are they very specific about like how they want you to voice a character? And then I don't know if sometimes you are physically with somebody or if you're never with somebody when there's multiple narrators in the same book.
It varies widely. So there are certain authors that I have long-standing relationships with, right, who I have a shorthand with. So I will, for instance, text Emily Henry if I'm reading a new book and say, who did you have in your mind when you were writing this character? Like, who is Miles, right? Just in your head, so that I understand a little bit of where she's coming from. Um, Other authors are just like, I trust you, whatever you want to do, just do it. And then with some books, like I'm thinking specifically of a YA fantasy series that I was doing, it was 5 books over the course of maybe 7 years or something. Because of the world building involved in that, I was very close with the author in terms of, because I had to create accents whole cloth out of, the type of race or species that she had invented for these books. And so that's a much larger type of collaboration. But for the most part, what also blew my mind when I first got into this industry was how hands-off it was. How a producer would just send a book and be like, send us the files when they're done. And tons of different accents and different genders and different ages. And I was like, you just trust me to, because again, in on camera, you have to prove everything, right? And I was just like, you're just really going to trust me to just read this thing. Okay.
Like freedom.
Yeah.
That's
That's
amazing.
what got me hooked. That's what I really liked about it. Is I was like, you mean I get to do all parts of this? I get to act everything and direct it and just it's a Julia Whelan production. Great.
And you're in your house right now?
Yes, I'm in my booth, in my office, in my house.
Did you do more outside of your house, like pre-COVID, or have you always been remote?
It wasn't COVID, it was actually a change in the industry. So when I first got started, again, 2009, let's say, to 2013 or 14, um, we were still going into studios. Everybody was going into studios. I lived in LA. There were a handful of studios I would work at, so I would be scheduled to go in and work on certain days on certain books. And then once I started doing it a lot and pretty full time, that became problematic with trying to have an on-camera career where I would be scheduled to go into a studio, but then I would have an audition come up last minute and I was screwing up their schedule. And I was like, ugh, I was very torn and I was like, I wish I could just do this on my own time. And that's about when people started building home studios and having their own booths. So I've been in my own booth since, yeah, 2013, 2014, I think.
Anything that gets challenging when you're recording, or maybe even like, I don't know, awkward. Like if you're doing like a smutty book and there's a sex scene, like does it get like awkward at all? Maybe more so if you've got like the man beside you, which rarely happens, or I don't know.
Well, what that's actually funny because that's reminding me of your earlier question about having other narrators in the booth. So weirdly, it's not the smutty stuff that can get uncomfortable because maybe I've just done so much of it. I'm like inoculated, but I don't get especially when I'm by myself, I don't even register those scenes as being different from other scenes. Like they're always the climactic scenes of the book, whether that's a battle
No pun
scene,
intended.
right? Everyone, we're still G-rated. But whether it's a battle scene or whether it's a fight scene or, it's when the cop finally tracks down the murderer, like those all of those scenes are serve a very specific purpose no matter what type of book it is. So I don't get weird about that when I'm recording it. I have done a few situations where I've actually been in studio with someone recording, but for the most part, we're on Zoom. We just, for my company, for Audiobrary, we just did a re-record of Sierra Simone's erotic romance trilogy. That's an MMF trilogy. And it's funny because advanced listening copies are going out and people's reactions to it are like, oh, this is so intense, like it's so intimate. And I'm just kind of laughing to myself because I'm like, if you had only been there when we were all like recording and stopping every couple lines because someone's stomach growled and, you know, someone mispronounced this word and we started over and then we had to laugh and then like someone had to go blow their nose and like it's just not in any way
Like it's
sexy.
not as sexy as you think.
No, it's hardly that. It's the opposite of it. So yeah,
Okay, you mentioned Audiobrary. This
yeah.
is something you founded. Tell me what it is and why you founded it.
Yeah. So having done 700 books over 15 years and really watched the industry explode, I was very frustrated with the fact that the people who were the least likely to make money in this industry were narrators. And the main thing, my main complaint, because we have very low session fees to begin with, just, publishing is an expensive process. Not every book is going to earn out. So there's always everyone wants to keep costs as low as possible, which I, of course, completely understand. But we don't get any royalties. So when a book is massively successful, and I've done a number of them over my career, I don't see anything for that. While meanwhile, the author is enjoying the success, the publisher is enjoying the success, and the retailers, Audible will take 50 to 75% off the top of a book, depending on what the contract is. So the fact that Audible was making more on these books than anyone just never sat right with me. And after years of asking traditional publishers to do the right thing and give me a royalty, and being told that's just not the way the industry works, I said, well, then I think I need to start my own publishing company so I can do it. And then you can't tell me no one else does it because I'm doing it. So I started Audiobrary with um, the kind of overarching why of just wanting the creatives to be the people that get the most for the product they're creating. So authors get a higher percentage, narrators are getting a royalty, and we also are a direct-to-consumer retail channel, so people can buy directly through us, and we will give you bonus features um, that you can't get anywhere else. Like all of our projects are available everywhere. We don't want to gatekeep, but when you come to Audiobrary, you get bonus features. You can also rent the projects for cheaper than anywhere else. And it's really going into the pockets of the people that actually created it.
That's genius. I feel like you're way ahead of the game on that one. Like others will follow later because that just like to me it just sounds like common sense, but they're like, "No, that's not the way it works, so we're not going to do it
No,
like
and
that."
I don't have the time. I'm sorry, but publishing moves so glacially and like I don't have the time to wait around. Like we've got synthetic voice AI sort of bearing down on us. That's going to change the industry. And to me, I without underselling like how devastating that's going to be to a lot of people. I don't want to make less of it, but I'm really concerned with once it's here and it's a viable part of the audio landscape, then what are we doing for the actual humans that are still trying to create and trying to be in the work? We can't keep going the way we're going. I mean, I even find I just turned 41. I'm slowing down. I can't do the volume that I used to be able to do in this industry. I can't do 70 books a year anymore. And there is no other way to make money doing this than to do more. And that's not sustainable. It's not fair. And to me, it's kind of my Hail Mary attempt to change something as opposed to just walking away. Because I was just going to walk away and just write full time and not engage in this anymore because I was just tired of feeling exploited. But I feel like it's fixable. To your point, I don't, this is not difficult. Like it's hard work, but it's an easy message. Everyone supports what I'm trying to do. Um, and we can do this. We just need to create the systems because the systems are breaking down anyway. So let's just reinvent them.
So with all of that in mind, if somebody wants to break into the industry and become an audiobook narrator, what would you advise them today?
So I actually it just came off of a really great panel conversation for a women in media company, and there were a couple of audiobook people on the panel. And one thing that I found really heartening actually is that one of the producers who works at PRH had said that they just want really great actors. Like they still don't look at people's TikTok followers, or it doesn't matter to them. It's, are you good at this and can you tell the story? Because I have been telling people you've got to have a brand, like you've got to be identifiable, you have to be visible because it's such an invisible thing. Like we are so, most people don't pay attention to who the narrators are on their audiobooks. And that just makes us replaceable. And so I have been saying, you've got to have a brand, you've got to, you've got to be you have to have a market of your own. And she was saying she didn't really care. Now, again, I think that's being PRH and it doesn't really matter to them necessarily. They're going to sell books regardless. But it does go back to you have to have something to offer that they can't get with a robotic voice. So you just be as good as you can possibly be. I mean, so much of what I do is, yes, it's acting training and it's knowing my instrument and it's having facility with accent, all of that. But it's also being a writer and it's understanding how books are made and it's understanding how stories are constructed and being able to grok what an author is trying to do with a book and translate that to the listener.
And you learned a little bit of that in school, but I'm sure you learned way more when you were writing Thank You for Listening and My Oxford Year. Can you talk to us about like if there's something in the book industry that needs to be done? It's like Julia Whelan's like check, check, check. Like you are very much immersed in the industry.
I am. Well, and that's where I think with Audiobrary, like obviously where I'm coming at it from the narrator perspective first and foremost of just being so frustrated. But I am also looking at it as a traditionally published author, saying it's broken for authors too. Um, and it's only going to get worse as well. And so for me, I yeah, I came out of a creative writing program. I was a screenwriter even before that, even when I was a teenager, I was doing some screenplay work. And then when I graduated, I went back to doing that. But what was very interesting about audiobooks and the job that kind of fell into my lap is that I was reading so widely, stuff I would have never read if it were just up to me, because I was very snobby and very literary. And when I started reading a raft of sci-fi and romance and YA and realizing that good writing is just good writing. And I learned so much about how to write something that people actually want to read from not just the stuff that will impress people, but the stuff that people actually want to read from doing this job. And and that's why I'm a generalist. That's why the Audiobrary catalog is all over the place because I like things in all category and genre.
My Oxford Year has turned into, is it a movie or a series on
It's
Netflix?
a movie.
The movie. Okay, so I saw previews for it, and right away I was sold. I have three kids, and we love Sophia Carson because we are big Descendants fans, and we're like,
Yeah.
there's Evie. Evie is in a movie. Like, already sold, already got to watch it. And she's originally from Ohio. I'm originally from Ohio, so I'm like, double sold, got to watch it for sure. Tell me about not just writing it, but then the fact that it's like, oh, hey, Julia, we want to turn this into a movie on Netflix.
Well, here's what's fascinating about this. So this book has an origin story that you don't see a lot. I'll break this down. So it started as a screenplay, actually, and it wasn't my screenplay. It started as an original screenplay by Allison Burnett that was set up at a studio that I was hired to work on. So I was hired along with a friend of mine who also went to Oxford and was a screenwriter. We were hired to fix the authenticity issues, like to just make it feel more like Oxford. It didn't work on the academic level, on the student life level. It just no one had been there. Um, and we were the, I don't know, third or fourth writer team to be on this at this point. And that's just the way Hollywood works. But over the course of those revisions and that rewrite, the producers really got to know my opinion about this story and everything that I wanted it to be and what I wanted to do with the character. And I was also dealing with grief for the first time, and my father had died very suddenly the year prior, and I just felt a personal connection to this story that went above and beyond the usual screenwriter pickup work. So they're the ones who asked me, do you think there's enough here for a book? And I just had one of those like full body shivers because it was like, that's what this has needed to be all along, is a book. And I wanted the space to write about literature and poetry and that time in your life where you maybe come to understand that the thing you've been striving for your whole life is actually something you don't want anymore. And it just, I was able to take the structure of a story and turn it into something that was very personal to me. So, to answer that question, though, I was writing the book while the film was already in pre-production. There was another cast attached. It was moving forward, and I was writing as fast as I could to try to get this book out. And of course, Hollywood being Hollywood, when it fell apart three other times, it's come back and forth, the strikes, the COVID. It was like it's just been a journey, but these producers always believed in this project and didn't give up when a lot of other people would have. And so the film is finally coming out. But it's interesting that it's different from the book because the book and the film were always on two parallel tracks.
They're always different. And do you voice the audiobook in my
I
Oxford?
do. Yes, I read the book. Yeah.
As you should. And then
Yes.
what about Thank You for Listening? Great title for a book by
Thank you. So
you, by the way.
thank you for listening came out of after because I was writing historical fiction, I was writing YA, and then when my Oxford year fell into my lap, I was like, oh, well, I guess I'm writing romantic women's fiction or love stories now, whatever this is. And so the inevitable question is, what are you writing next? And I didn't have another good love story idea, but I said, I have been for years trying to figure out how to write a screenplay, a rom-com set in the audiobook world. But again, at the time, the rom-com market in Hollywood had really dried up. You couldn't sell anything on spec anymore. And I was like, maybe that's a book. And it was the, for me at that time, I was worried that there weren't enough people who cared about audiobooks to care about a book about audiobook narrators. But that ended up not being true. And it was the tone I wanted to do was this like very self-aware rom-com, this like a loving send-up of romance, um, set in the audiobook world. I mean, it's basically You've Got Mail set in the audiobook world.
I
Two
love
audiobook
that.
narrators who fall in love while recording a romance novel, but they don't know who the other person is because they're recording under aliases.
That's clever. I like it.
Yeah,
I
it's
like it.
fun.
Now, do you read books like for pleasure, or are you like, I'll just read this while I voice it? That'll be my version of
Yeah, I
reading.
mean, I don't, first of all, because every book I record, I have to read ahead of time and prep. And so, there's so much work to be done on that front. I also still blurb occasionally. So, and then I've got a slush pile now for Audiobrary of books that I'm always reading. So I really don't have time to read for pleasure, which it's like the classic, right? Get into the job that you love for the reason that you love it, and then you'll never be able to do that anymore because you'll be so busy doing the other stuff.
So when you read the book before you record the book, how are you reading it differently? Like, what kind of notes are you making in the margins, or like, what is that process like?
So I'm keeping two lists as I'm reading. So I'm getting a general feel for the tone and the voice of the book and like how I think what the author's intention is. So I've got like a 10,000-foot level of just what is this story? How am I going to tell it? But then I'm also keeping a word list of any words that I need to research, know how to pronounce. Sometimes it's author invention, but sometimes it's just real like place names or something. And then I'm keeping a character list of all the speaking characters and any vocal traits that the author has given them, as well as any biographical information that I think is important. And then I can build out the kind of constellation of the main characters who are always talking to each other and try to differentiate their voices enough so that the listener can follow the story.
What's your favorite book you have voiced and why?
There's no way. And I'm not dodging. It's just every time Emily writes something, it's my favorite of hers. Like each new book is my new favorite of hers. Same with Taylor. There are certain books that stand out for me because of for performance reasons or for books that were very important to my career, like Gone Girl, obviously, Educated. But then also like I'm saying, like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is one where I just feel so proud of that performance because I made specific choices that I wasn't totally sure was going to work, and then they did, and I was so happy about that. So yeah, it's there's a lot.
That's where I first heard you, was that book.
Uh,
What choices did you make where you were like, oh,
so
good?
that's actually a good story about consulting with the author. So V had written that book kind of with my voice in her head a little bit. So she had a very distinct idea of, it was kind of written for me in a way, which was a really beautiful experience. But when I went in and I read it, I was like, so here's what I'm struggling with. I was like, how are we going to track this girl who never ages, is perpetually 24, but has lived 300 years worth of experience? How can I convey that vocally? And we have alternating chapters going back and forth in time. So when she's in France, she has a very country French accent, but it slowly gets away from her and like stripped away from her by the time it's 2014 and she's a hipster living in Brooklyn. And I was worried that because the book wasn't following a linear path, that listeners would think I just like couldn't hold the accent because it's jumping back and forth. But it ended up working, and I think that I just wasn't giving the listener enough credit that they could follow the story and understand what was happening to that character as she was
Yeah,
growing. Yeah.
that's genius.
Well, that came out of a lot of consultation with V of saying, what do we do? Because the other choice was to just not do any accents at all. And just, realistically, if she's living in her village in France, no one there is going to have a French accent because they don't have accents when they're talking to each other in their native language. So we could just do that. We could do nothing. And I was like, but I want the listener to feel 300 years and experience and worldliness in this character. So how do we do that vocally?
Any advice you would give to anybody who wants to start a bookish business or get involved in the industry in some way professionally?
This is advice that was given to me early on, and this wasn't a hard thing to do because I think if you're a true fan of books, this is not difficult, but be a good literary citizen. And what that means is showing up for people and not in like a craven networky way, but when you genuinely love something, support it. Like shout it from the rooftops, build people up. So many of the relationships and friendships that I have today are with people who I just always respected what they were doing. Taylor is one of those. Emily is one of those. There's people behind the scenes, producers that I've always felt that way, who we just I show up for people when I can. I am supportive of people who are trying to do something different. And again, not for any idea of like this may pay off somewhere down the road, but just being someone who people feel safe with and supported by goes a long way to then when you do put out your own shingle. I mean, I never thought I would have my own audio publishing company. Like that, I'm not entrepreneurial. If I left my own devices, I would like to just be reading books all day and writing them. Like I don't actually have any interest in running a company, but when I got to the point where I was like, I need to do something about this, people showed up to support me. So that's what I can say. And knowing the industry is, I think, so important. It always surprises me sometimes how much narrators don't understand how publishing works. They don't understand how the money works. They don't get it because they see themselves as a part of it, like they're separate from it. But truly understanding the industry that you're in, I think, is helpful.